more experts on the indices. For you, Christina, do you want to tell us more about some of the things that you wanted to keep for the later part of our discussion?
Sorry, I cannot hear very well from here. Can you say it again?
Oh, you said that you were saving some of what you wanted to say till later. Do you want to bring that in now?
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, first I wanted to listen to my colleagues, okay? And yes, I would like to add a final reflection to what I have previously said. If the indicators that measure well-being are being constantly revised, so must happen with the indicators that measure poverty. I think that our aim now is to identify how culture can help in fighting poverty. We understand that culture can be a real economic driver only if it contributes to lower the poverty rates. I think that we all agree on that. In that sense, I think that it is essential to go beyond material poverty and redefine the indicators. Following the paper presented for this Congress by Professor Yoti Osaka, key elements such as urbanization and migration, access to income and employment, housing and slums, food, nutrition, and healthcare, or social conflicts and biases must be introduced in those indexes. Once those elements are identified and indicators modified in accordance, I think that we will be able to design policies that help culture act as economic driver in order to reinforce social cohesion, guarantee diversity, promote gender equality, and empower women, and set up frameworks for real effectiveness. That's regarding poverty. I wanted to make that reflection.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, yes, we would love to hear from you, and I think we're happy to have a discussion. So it doesn't have to be just a narrow question. Yes.
Thank you. For me, it's a question. Yeah. Thank you very much. I did read the paper before coming here. It's very insightful. And Michel Lamont, it is very important that discussions take place also together with development policymakers and development economists. You've made a comment in passing. I have the impression myself that much more than about 15, 20 years ago, development policymakers and development economists are also quite interested in these.
Slightly more slowly. It's hard to hear you, isn't it? There's some kind of echo. It's very hard to hear you. Maybe just slightly more slowly.
I'm not going to repeat, and let me go to my third point, to Catherine's comment. I was very much interested in your listening. Yes, you went very fast, yes. But you did say that people in Canada were involved in the choice of the components, 8, and also in the choice of all the sub-components. Quite a few, you gave illustrations, the whole framework. And my question is, after having set up that framework on the basis of the input of people in Canada, when you develop, measure the composite index after 15 years, or you may do it perhaps year after year, are you also asking the people themselves on the basis of interviews to which extent there is some progress with regard to the various indicators and sub-indicators, or does the influence of the people stop by making the choice of the pattern itself? Am I clear?
It's a great question. We certainly consulted Canadians in developing the index, and we used focus groups and interviews to validate our model. We haven't gone back to reweight, and it really becomes a question. Some of the work in the UK has been interesting in this regard. No one's asked a question. We equally weight each indicator in our index. And that was a long, heated, fierce debate, I won't tell you.
Indicates how comprehensively societies are trying to acknowledge minority groups as worthy members of the community. So that at least will address part of the problem. I don't know when it comes to arts and culture. I will simply mention two things that pertain to some of the questions that have been asked. On suicide, I will simply mention one very interesting study which was conducted in British Columbia among members of Aboriginal groups, where suicide rates was extremely high, and it was found that in tribes where there was a systematic attempt to teach children about their collective identity and the history of their group, suicide rates went down. So this really speaks to the power of collective identity and keeping people engaged and developing a sense of hope and collective capability. On the homeless, I think there again I would advocate an emphasis on hope. One of my graduate students is looking at very low-income men, African American and whites in Boston, and he's been analyzing how some of them are using the internet to create fictitious invitations. So, for instance, working once a year as a DJ at parties will allow a guy to, suddenly define himself as a DJ, even if this occupation is salient in his life in a very intermediary fashion. But that, together with religion and having children, gives low-income population sources of hope, which does not replace food, does not replace material resources, but certainly makes a difference. So I'll simply mention that.
In terms of your question about whether you envision a time when we have a measure that integrates culture that goes beyond GDP, that is what I heard. That's a difficult question. I think we're on the road to that. I find hope in, as I said, community level work. And I think one measure of success of the initiatives that Christina outlined and that we've been talking about now are we're really getting to a place, I think, where we can look at developing processes for communities to tell their own story that speaks to people who are homeless or other marginalized groups. And again, these indicators and the processes and the methodologies that we're developing can be tools to empower the collective voice of marginalized groups. And so I think that's an important note to end on. Certainly, as Michelle talked about in Canada, the experience in Aboriginal communities, and they are doing work on looking at indicators of Aboriginal well-being in Canada, which are very much community-based and speak to the importance of culture in their essential speak. I could have spoken a bit more about that. I only say that work is critical because in Canada as well we have a natural experiment where we had systematically, up until the 1980s, children were systematically removed from Aboriginal communities to schooling by church-run institutions and the like, the residential school experience, where culture was systematically taken away from generations of children, and the devastation that has wrought on those communities lives on and continues to live on. We know the devastating impact of removing culture, so it's imperative to take culture into our account as we begin to tell these community stories and to seek a much better and more prosperous future for certain.
Moi, je crois que, parce que nous est dans un débat, nous serons certainement d'accord sur nos désaccords. Nous sommes d'accord sur nos désaccords parce que Madame Einstein disait les mathématiques de mon mari, je ne les comprends pas, mais je comprends mon mari. Je crois pour ma part que les indicateurs, comme nous le disons, et comme leur mot l'indique, et comme leur mot le signifie, ils montrent le chemin. Mais ce ne sont pas les indicateurs qui luttent contre la pauvreté. Ils aident à comprendre certaines nuances. Et je crois que les indicateurs en cela sont importants. Mais si j'ai un pauvre dans la rue, je ne peux pas commencer d'abord par regarder sa mesure de pauvreté, à quel niveau est-ce que se trouve cette mesure, avant de le sortir de la pauvreté. Je pense donc qu'il y a ici un niveau vraiment très important. Mesure, d'accord, mais je vous ai parlé des spécialistes nuls. Eux-mêmes disent qu'ils sont perplexes. Ils sont perplexes au niveau des mesures, parce que les mesures, effectivement, il y a de l'irrationalité dans l'humain qu'on n'arrive pas à mesurer. C'est pour ça que je vous ai donné l'exemple de Madame Einstein. Le travail qui est fait peut être fait, c'est vrai. Il doit être fait, d'accord. Mais à mon humble avis, il ne se situe pas au premier rang de la lutte contre la pauvreté. C'est un point de vue.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to ask some of the questions. Firstly, regarding the question about local capabilities, I would like to remind Martha Nussbaum's theory about central capabilities, okay? And I would like to reinforce her theory by the philosophy or approach of Yoti Osagrahans, that he says that culture is the ideal tool, let's say, to develop those place-based capabilities. I mean, but they need local assets. I mean, they are very aware that there should be facilities by means of the public authorities, training policies by means of the universities, and so on. I mean, to facilitate the conditions to people to have those capabilities, okay? But now I think that we are aware that the local is very relevant for this. And I would also like to answer the question from Africa. I don't want to say that they don't exist, okay? I don't know, right? But I know where to look for them, okay? So I think that there is a very relevant observatory of cultural policies in Africa, OPCA, that it was founded by UNESCO. And there is also an association of leisure studies, LARASA. So I think that if we want to look for more information, these are the sources. And I'm nearly convinced that tomorrow in the UNESCO New Indicators Development Suite, they have worked with some countries in Africa. Thank you. And I would like to finish with something, yes, because we didn't speak about that, and I think it is very relevant today. It's about the social participation, okay? I think that nowadays citizens cannot feel co-responsible of the results of our cultural policies if they have not participated in the co-decision and co-creation of these processes. Those are processes that give a real sense to their formal rights and exchange framework for their capacities and a public space for their liberties. I think that we cannot forget, I mean, the power of civil society nowadays.
Well, I think we are really now out of time, and since we've had such a long day, I will just thank you very, very much, and thanks to all of you, and I'm happy to discuss some of the issues you were asking about agricultural productivity and the creative industries. We could maybe talk about that afterwards. Thank you.